the little mermaid saw a large ship in which sailors were singing and dancing. She quietly continued watching them. In the evening, there was a celebration on the ship because of the 16th birthday of the prince. The little mermaid was fascinated by the prince. But alas, a terrible storm blew over the sea that night. The little mermaid saw the ship sinking. All the sailors drowned. She quickly dived into the sea and saved the prince. The prince was unconscious. In the morning, the mermaid carried the prince to the shore. She laid him down on the sand. She went back to the sea as she did not want anybody to see her. Soon a pretty girl walking by saw the prince lying there. She carried him to a house nearby with the help of some fishermen. Meanwhile, the little mermaid kept on thinking about the prince. She tried to look for him, but did not succeed. When she told her sisters about him, her sisters found out his palace. Now, she always waited near his palace just to see him. Her grandmother told her, "We live longer than humans, but their souls live forever." Now, the little mermaid wanted to have a human soul. For this, she went to the sea witch who knew magic. The witch said, "I will give you 2 human legs in exchange for your tail. But you have to give me your voice. If the prince loves another, you will change into white sea foam." The little mermaid nodded her head to say yes. Then the witch gave her a magic potion to drink. When she drank the bitter potion, she became unconscious. When she gained consciousness, she found herself in the arms of her prince. Now she had 2 legs instead of a tail. The prince took her back to the palace. There she enjoyed herself and danced away the whole day, but she could neither speak nor sing. She and the prince were happy. One day, the king ordered the prince to marry the daughter of a neighboring king. When the prince saw the princess, he found her to be the same girl who had saved him on the beach. The prince fell in love with her and then and there decided to marry her. This saddened the little mermaid. She knew that her time of death was near, and she tried to spend as much time as she could with her prince. But alas, she could not tell him of her love for him, as she could not speak. At the same time, her sisters came to know about this. They brought her a magic knife from the witch. They said, little sister, now you will have to kill the prince in his sleep. Only after that can you come back to sea as a mermaid." The little mermaid quietly came to the prince's room at night. He was sleeping. She kissed him but could not stab him with the knife as she truly loved him. So, after giving him one last look, she threw herself into the sea. She found herself in the sky with the daughters of the sky, the twinkling stars, and now she lives happily and joyfully with them. Puss in Boots. Once upon a time there lived a poor miller who had 3 sons. When he died, all he owned was divided between his sons. The eldest had the mill, the second had the donkey, and the youngest son had the miller's cat. The boy was very fond of the cat, but he could not see how the cat could ever make him rich. As he softly touched the cat, she said, "Don't worry, master. If you do what I tell you, you will see how much I can do for you. First, get me a large bag and a pair of boots." The son of the miller took some money he had and bought a large bag and a fine pair of yellow-coloured boots. The cat put on her new pair of boots and at once went out into the garden. This was the pussycat in boots. She picked up some carrots from the garden and put it in the bag. Then she went off across the fields until she found a rabbit hole. She put the bag down its mouth wide open so that the carrot could be seen. Then she hid herself behind a low hedge. Soon a fat grey rabbit showed his head out of the hole. He smelt the fresh carrots and jumped into the bag to eat it. The pussycat in boots jumped immediately from the hedge and quickly tied the strings of the bag together, and the fat rabbit was caught. Then Puss carried the bag on her shoulder and came to the king's palace wearing her yellow boots. She bowed before the king and said, "Your Majesty, I have brought you a fat rabbit from the estate of my master, the Prince of Carabas." The king was surprised at the sight of the yellow boots, but he did not show his surprise. He accepted the gift. The next day, Puss put a handful of grain into her bag and went out into the fields. She put a bag on the ground and lay down beside it, pretending to be dead. Two parrots came and they started to eat the grains. Pussycat in Boots waited for the right moment and quickly tied the strings of the bag, catching both the parrots inside. Once more, she set off for the palace and presented herself before the king. "My master, the Prince of Carabas, begs you to accept these two parrots," said Pussycat in Boots, bowing with respect.
"Tell your master," said the king, "that I am pleased to accept his gift. He must have a fine castle." "Oh yes, it is very fine," said Puss, bowing before the king, and left him. As she went through the halls of the palace, she heard that the king and his daughter were going to drive beside the river that afternoon. Puss raced home to her master and told him about the visit to the king's palace. She then said to him, "I want you to go and swim in the river. If anyone asks your name, you are to say that you are the Prince of Carabas." The miller's son left Puss in Boots to guard his boots. And went to swim in the river. Puss carefully hid the clothes under a pile of stones and waited for the royal carriage. As the carriage came near, Puss ran out shouting, "Help! Help! The Prince of Carabas is drowning!" The king ordered the carriage to stop and ordered his servants to rescue the prince. Then Puss went up to the carriage with her hat in her hand. She bowed before the king and princess and said, "We are indeed so grateful that you passed by. But alas, a thief has stolen my master's clothes." The king sent a servant to the palace to get a suit. When the miller's son put it on, he looked just like a prince. "This is my master, the Prince of Carabas," said Puss to the king and princess as she graciously introduced the miller's son. "We hope you will drive on and drive with the prince." "It will be a pleasure," replied the king, and he invited the prince to ride in his carriage. Puss ran ahead of the carriage across the fields. When she met some haymakers, she warned them, "When the king passes this way and enquires to whom this field belongs to, you are to say, 'To the Prince of Carabas, your majesty.' If you don't say so, you will be cut into little pieces." Now the land actually belonged to a terrible giant. He was feared by all people. But Puss walked boldly into his castle. "I have heard that you can turn yourself into any animal you wish. Is that true?" asked the Puss calmly. "Yes, of course," said the giant, full of pride. In a flash, he became a roaring lion. Though Puss was terrified of the sight of the big lion, she continued bravely, "It is amazing that you can become a big lion. But surely it would be difficult for you to change into a tiny creature such as a mouse." The giant said, "Oh no, it is no problem at all." In an instant he disappeared and became a tiny mouse. Puss sprang upon the tiny mouse and with one shake killed it. Thus the giant who became a tiny mouse died. At that very moment the king's carriage came near the castle. "You have a large estate and a fine castle," said the king to the miller's son. The king was told by the haymakers that the fields belonged to the prince. The king, princess, and the miller's son and Puss went inside the castle and sat down to a grand feast. "This young man would become a good husband for my daughter." So the king turned to the miller's son, saying, "Will you marry my daughter?" The miller's son and the princess fell in love with each other. Soon they got married and lived together happily in the giant's castle. Puss in Boots lived in comfort for the rest of her days, and she never had to hunt again. Little Thumb. Once upon a time, there lived a woodcutter and his wife. They had 7 children. They were very poor, and it was hard for them to look after their children. They had a child called Little Thumb, who was the youngest in their family. He was always ill, and his size was no bigger than one's thumb. Once there was a bad famine, and the woodcutter's family found it difficult to feed his family. One night he decided that he would leave his children in a forest, and they would somehow look after themselves. Little Thumb heard what his parents had talked about. His father gave each of his children a piece of bread for breakfast. Little Thumb had an idea. He thought of throwing small bits of bread along the way, so he put his bread bits in his pocket. The family went into the forest, and the woodcutter began his work. The children also helped him. When the parents saw that their children were busy, they quietly went away unseen. They were unhappy at what they had done to their children. When the children came to know that their parents had left them in the thick forest, they began to cry. But Little Thumb did not cry. He knew that he could find a way back with the help of the bits of bread that he had thrown along the way. But something bad happened. The birds had eaten every bit of bread. Now all the children were afraid. But Little Thumb had great ideas. He climbed to the top of a tall tree to see if he could find anything. There he saw a light shining a little far away. He walked with his brothers towards the light. They arrived at a big house. a large woman opened the door and asked them what they wanted. Little Thumb told them his story and requested her to give him a place to stay. The woman began to cry and told them that the house belonged to a cruel giant who eats up little children. But they asked her again and she let them come in. She hoped that she could hide them from the giant until the morning. When the children were sitting near the fire, they heard the giant coming. The woman quickly hid the children under the bed. She opened the door and let the giant in. The giant sat down on the chair and asked for food. He smelled the air and told his wife, "I smell fresh meat." He got up from the table and ran towards the bed. He pulled out the children from the bed one by one. The poor children fell to the ground and cried. But they did not know that they were in a house of one of the cruelest giants in the world. He picked up a sharp knife and came near the children to cut them up. Suddenly, his wife told him, "You are tired now. Can you eat them in the morning?" The giant agreed with her and told her, "Give them enough food and make them sleep." The good woman was happy now, and she gave food to the children. But the children were afraid, and they could not eat anything. The giant, in the meantime, had too much to drink and fell asleep. When Little Thumb saw that the giant was fast asleep, he and his brothers escaped out of the house. They ran all night and did not know where they were going. When the giant came to know that the children had escaped, he became very angry and told his wife to bring them his 7-league boots at once. Wearing those boots, he went out to search for the children. He stepped from one mountain to the other. He crossed over rivers as easily as if they were streams. At last, he found the road where the children were resting. Little Thumb hid behind a rock. He kept a watch over the giant. The giant was very tired due to the long trip, and so he decided to take rest. He soon fell asleep. Little Thumb put on the magical boots of the giant and went back to the giant's wife. He told her that the giant was in great danger, as he had been captured by a gang of thieves. He also added that they would kill the giant if he did not give them all his money. Little Thumb showed the giant's wife the 7-league boots. This convinced her that her husband was indeed in great trouble. The woman gave Little Thumb all the giant's money. Little Thumb returned with the money and his brothers to his father's house. He was received with great joy there. The giant was ashamed of being tricked by that incident. The people never heard from him again.